Thanks so much, Seema. That was, I mean, it was really great. All, I mean, the whole, story has been really interesting. But Ravi, since you spoke first, and you haven't had a chance to comment on any of the other speakers, I thought I'd ask you briefly to make some comments if you have questions for the other panelists, but also if you have comments about what they have spoken of, and then we will open it up to questions. On questions, I have one note, which is that Nalini has to catch a flight to Bangalore, and she has to leave exactly at 5:30. So when we take questions, we'll go back to Nalini first to answer the questions, but first over to you, Ravi.
Just a couple of quick comments. The whole system is now technology driven. So we must sort of understand that what is driving this. The money is in technology, and so every municipality wants to install a disposal technology. Incineration finds favor not because it's the best technology, because it's the most expensive technology you can install. And you have to see that who are the people who are proposing incinerators. There are very large companies across the world. There are major incinerator manufacturers who propose them. They have a very, very, very big lobbying power, and they promise the moon when they come. The new rule, one of the key things when you incinerate, because it's a very important thing to consider as a technology, is that in the new rules there are 1,500 calories, kilocalories of the waste value. Because otherwise, if you have less calorific value in the waste, you are a you're a negative energy producer. You're not producing energy, you're putting more diesel than energy being produced. And one of the big questions in the Timarpur plant when we're evaluating is, they said the waste value is about 2,000 kilocalories. They said it's impossible because the kilocalories is 800. Because the waste composition is still largely organic. So that's the first thing, that this technology, why I'm saying it's a technology is a sham, and municipalities are running after it because these are huge projects. The second is in the climate change conversation, incineration has been given a fillip. So a lot of the money comes from the CDM monies. So incineration was not on the cards for many, many years. It came up after the climate change, and Lavanya probably knows more about it, it's in mitigation. So it's promoted as a technology of choice in mitigation. What that does is that it does not take into account the kind of waste. At a certain scale, certain composition of waste where you have combustibles, like in Europe, you have a high, almost 60% of combustibles, not 10 to 15%. Incineration might make sense. Also, they don't do energy. What they do is that they circulate the heat as energy. They're not doing a double conversion of energy. They're not doing waste to energy and back to electricity.
They're not doing waste to electricity.
They're not doing waste to electricity. They're doing waste to energy, and they circulate in the neighborhood. They circulate the thermal heat as energy. It makes sense in Europe because right now it's probably minus 15. So it makes little sense because who will you give the energy to, in a sense? So they try and feed back to the grid. And for the longest time, the Ministry of, it's renamed now, the Department of, what was the Department of Non-Renewable Energy, was to get the contract between the State Electricity Board and the plant so that it could be viable, because the buy electricity is a much lower rate than which the cost of production of that. So getting the contract in place was very, very critical. And still now, the cost of that is much higher than the cost of coal. So it is seen as a waste disposal option, and a high-cost waste disposal option, and that's when you start looking at the politics of what technology is being promoted where.
Thanks, Ravi.
I think we have time for a couple of rounds of questions.
On the mic.
I think we have time for a couple of rounds of questions, so I'll take some questions and then we'll hand it over to the panelists, and then we probably have time for a second round as well. So,
what is the biggest change that came about between the 2000 and 2016 rules, and how has that contributed to some of these efforts? Because I remember you mentioning the recognition of waste because as one of the things that was there.
Urvashi, I'm from an NGO called Practical Action, and thank you, Nalini ji. We must replicate it in Delhi. Even if we do 10%, it'll be very useful. We are doing a similar work with waste workers. I want to ask you, um, uh, is there a risk of the municipality abdicating its responsibility? You were saying they're going, waste pickers are going to new areas. And also, how have you linked up? Are they supporting you technically and financially through the Amrit or the smart city schemes? Are they? Is there a capacity building of the sanitary workers, which is very essential for sustainability of this whole new initiative?
Thank you for these wonderful presentations, and thank you all for your work as well. I want to sort of step back a little bit to contextualize this as part of the larger series that we've had. One of the reasons we're having this discussion is we feel that for an informed citizen, and even for groups such as ourselves that don't work directly on this, it's very hard to actually get your head around the empirical phenomenon of air pollution spikes. Understand what it's caused by and what you can do about it. So the difficulty, of course, is that each of these sub-areas, whether it's waste, transport, agriculture, etc., is a whole complex ecosystem in and of itself. So our effort is to try and kind of distill what is a complex issue into something very simple, so that we can have a better conversation about it. So clearly, one of the things to deal with air is to solve comprehensively the waste issue, not just symptomatically. But to communicate this to people who may not have the interest and the appetite to spend so long on a particular area is quite tough. So in that vein, so sorry for the long preamble, but that's kind of where we're trying to go towards. So in that context, I want to ask Ravi in particular a clarificatory question. The people who worked on waste, and I appreciate your comments about the waste climate story, which has been very complex and not necessarily productive, focus on dioxins. The air pollution people are trying to tell a simple story around PM 2.5, right? And PM 2.5 and those response relations, these integrated assessment response curves on health. So that is a relatively simple story for somebody to understand. How does one, in a communication way, relate the dioxin story to the PM 2.5 story? There's only so many metrics one can grab. The second thing is, in terms of the larger public conversation, do we need to shift the story? Should the simple message be, we need to shift the story from end-of-pipe controls to upstream source reduction, right, and disposal story? Is that, help us sort of bring this to a few simple messages.
The latter, sorry, I thought.
Yeah, so just, yeah, so there were three questions. So, I thought we go to Nandini first, and it was like just in the order, so like the next one also just yes.
So between 2000 and 2016, there was also a draft in 2013, which was really disastrous. We had a PIL going on in Karnataka High Court, so we brought in a stay for 2013 and pushed the government to look at all the progressive judgment given in 2000, from 2000 onwards in High Court of Bangalore. So, so most of the rulings that has come out of that PIL is reflected in 2016 law. One is, of course, waste pickers and their contribution, including decentralization was talked about. Bulk generator was a contribution of, Bangalore. And we also had waste to energy also. We were really against waste to energy, but we didn't want to voice it so loudly. We said we'll change. We'll make sure that waste to energy guys don't get waste. That's how we started. Segregation and stuff like that. So hierarchy of the waste. What can go into waste to energy has also come from directives from High Court. So there are a lot of such direct impact on the kind of waste system that you do it, and also decentralized method is pushed forward in 2016. In terms of supporting the activity of whatever we do, what we have simply done is you have 700 crores of budget in BBMP for solid waste management. Redistribution of that is what we have done. So that they will not go away from their ability or their responsibility.
So we are doing, what happened in Bangalore is it was all outsourced to contractors. That was the first city to go completely outsourced to contractors, and people, other cities went to learn from them. So in this way, contractors became very, very strong lobby and would hold the city ransom. So that took about 7 years of working with the court, with the bureaucracy to break that. And so dry waste collection is directly work order from the BBMP. That means they pay for that. Wet waste was going to, and the street sweeping, now they've taken all the workers of street sweeping on their payrolls 2 months back. And the third thing is the autos that was supposed to be picking up, we have something called micro plan. So in that micro plan, 750 households has one pickup. They pick up wet waste and sani waste every day, and 1,500 households for dry waste collection, which goes twice a week. So that is the micro plan, it was done. So based on that, they said, okay, for vehicle, we will give it to contractors. And they were not happy with it, so they are fighting a lot. So yesterday, actually, commissioner decided that we will not have them, we will give directly to the workers. So now, working with all the population that they have taken, bringing in managerial skills to manage all of them, bringing, setting up the process is what a huge task ahead of them. But I think in principle they have done a good job of taking the sanitary. Today, BBMP sanitary work earn more than the minimum wage, 17,000, minimum wage is 14. So if that really happens and we are all with it, it will take a year and a half to just kind of bring the whole thing together. Because contractors were so mad that they started burning waste when Sarvekshan team was in Bangalore, you know. So the city has taken that bold step, the government has taken that bold step, but next 1.5 years is going to be struggle to bring in the management. But if we are able to succeed, then we are in a better place.
One question that Navroza's question was, I think, and then the challenges of replicating Bangalore was the other question. Manish asked about the difference between 2016
That there's several.
vintage of the
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but
Before
talk,
Nalini leaves, I
yeah.
just want to share a couple of things with you. Because I was on a tour of some of the cities in South, and very particularly Warangal. In Warangal, the system, what you said, they call it DRCC, you know. DRCC basically is the Dry Resource Collection Centers. And that system is, I would say that more like, I would call it, supported by both the government and a corporate sector, is self-financing. Because what is happening is the waste, they are doing it for the last 6-7 years quite successfully. They have covered about 3/4 of the city quite successfully. I would say there is a DRCC, there are about 26 DRCC centers covering 3/4 of the wards. And waste collectors are collecting that waste door to door, somewhere on a regular basis, twice a week you said, perhaps they do it thrice a week. Bring it to the DRCC, everything is weighed there, they are paid money by the DRCC person. This is all supported by ITC, you know, and then from DRCC centers they take it to the central point, they call it a central point, where from the whole city the dry waste comes. They further segregate it in a very nice manner. They have got some machines for packing, baling, etc., etc. From there, they transfer it to the recycling units. And it's a system which is really working very well. At the same time, in a city, Trichy, which I visited very recently, they have got a new system of micro, what they call it? Huh? Yes, that's right. At a micro level, decentralized waste management, where as a matter of fact, both the wastes are brought in, the wet waste as well as the dry waste. And the dry waste obviously is segregated by the people who have now been from the informal sector. Not that they have been sort of, you know, made it brought into a formal sector, but they have been given a recognition as an impact of the 2016 rules. So I'm just trying to say that similar systems are being followed and it is really making an impact. But the issue was basically the air pollution that we were discussing.
Thanks.
And in these micro centers very particularly, what I found was they are working for 2 years. There's a lot of smell that is there, very bad smell, because they are also handling the organic waste there itself. And
That is
that's
a
a
problem.
very major problem. And there is a lot of opposition by the communities also surrounding those areas. Yes,
Thanks.
just got it.
Thanks for this. Thanks for your observations. Nalini, you want to comment
Yeah.
on this? Yeah.
So, Dry Waste Collection Center was the first one in Bangalore. ITC also was there. And today it is replicated in throughout Karnataka, plus Andhra has taken up a very big way. They call it Swachha centers, DRCC, different kind of centers. So that was a place where sanitary workers would bring the waste, and then it was, we bought it and sold it. That continues in Bangalore. The center runs on the profit-making business for the people who are working there. It's not a profit for others. But what we have found, the change of we going and collecting, all the 80% of the waste that cannot be recycling is coming. In the older method, only the high value waste was coming. The BBMP doesn't have to subsidize high value collection because there's already informal sector. Why the building is given by BBMP is to collect the low value and no value waste, which is either being burnt on the street or going to the landfill. So that is the tweak we have done now, and we have the results which shows 80% of the waste that is coming today with this method is actually non-recyclable. So the money is given for collection, not for running the dry waste collection center. Money by BBMP is given for collection, which is their primary responsibility, and running the dry waste collection center is done by the waste picker with the support of groups like us. It's a three-way MOU.
So Ravi, you have the very complex job now of convincing the air pollution crowd that they need to worry about solid waste, and how how this narrative, where the links are in this narrative.
Regarding your question about, you just have to see the two, they're completely different. The structures are different, the way its responsibilities are laid out are different. The inclusion of the informal sector, there are vast shift between 2000 and 2013, which they went to court against in 2016. It's quite a big shift. Regarding your question about the other pollutants besides the more classical pollutants, I think it's a very good question, but there's been a shifting recognition of pollutants even in the air pollution debate in the last 10 years. 2.5, and now you see people are talking about benzene and lead and ozone. So there's a very quickly shifting ground on what will constitute a proper amount, and this is because of new data, new understandings, new public information. In the same way, when we are now trying to shift open burning to controlled burning, because that's where the shift is going. And incidentally, one must recognize that all the contracts of what they call privatization of the waste is actually a subcontracting, and these are collect and dump contracts. So that means the private agency will collect the waste and dump it at the landfill or hand it to the incinerator operator. There is, of course, several problems with that. First, you cut out the informal sector, but also that you have no incentive for reducing the waste, because the more you collect, the more is your fees for which you get as a private operator. So there's sort of contradictions in what is being said should be done and what is actually the way the financial flows are happening on the ground. And so now if you are saying, okay, no open burning, then where? Then you take to incineration and some biomethanation. Incineration, then you have to focus on what does incineration really do in terms of air pollution. What are the trade-offs in air pollution, and what is the cost of the trade-off? And then it's a very sort of immediate jump into how do you look at the new technologies which are going to control the pollution. So this is where the shift is happening right now. And public information research on what the shift is all about, what the financial flows are all about, And the very important question somebody asked, I don't know about, does it mean the municipality takes less responsibility? Are you completely privatizing the waste stream? Which has other implications in terms of who controls the waste stream. One thing we're missing in the whole scenario, which we don't talk about, is recycling. So we say, okay, we're recycling, but who's recycling? It's the 10,000 informal sector tiny units which have horrendous air pollution inside, indoor air pollution and outdoor air pollution, horrendous labor conditions, who are recycling. And somehow we are saying, okay, it's being recycled, but we're not saying how it's recycled. And that's a very, very important question, because we don't have a recycling policy at all. So if I want to set up a recycling unit, I'm not a bankable project. You can't have. So while all these things are being touted around, the actual structures around the financial flows, the structures, the support which they're getting from the state, or the way the municipality is dealing with them, is actually non-existent. So these gaps, these big gaps are there. And essentially what is happening is private contractor, subcontracted by the municipality, for collect and dump. That's essentially what we're calling scientific management. Now, of course, in Delhi, they're trying to do some transfer stations. There's one coming up in South Delhi. But, these are such, Delhi is sort of, everybody focuses on Delhi. But, or the other thing is what Nalini is talking about. These are the sort of the great examples of what's happening on the ground, of trying to look at it. So, air pollution becomes a part of it. And you can take air pollution as the entry point into that, and even look at the shifts on what does that mean, I guess. I'm not suggesting, but I'm sort of trying to think aloud on your question.
Yeah, sure.
So, just trying to think, since there is a political moment of sorts on air pollution.
Yeah. And on waste.
Sorry?
Yeah.
And on Swachh Bharat, and on waste. A lot of money coming into waste.
Yeah. So how does one, sometimes these political moments, as you discussed with climate change, can distort a debate. So K's question is the air pollution debate going to distort or be productive for the waste debate? And
It
how
could,
can we make
it could be, or it may not be. It depends how we nuance the debate. And as you know, when we talk of environmental benefits, these are the nuanced debates in climate change as well. These are not straightforward, linear goods and bads. So I think we have to nuance the debate. We have to get out of the mentality that getting waste out of sight is the key priority. It is a very important priority, but it is not the only priority. How do you get that out of sight? So we have to nuance the debate in that. And unfortunately, it's just activists like me who have been doing this for a long time, or practitioners or consultants like Seema who are doing it, who have driven by doing something on the ground. And there has not been enough researchers who are trying to nuance the debate. So I would certainly encourage a more nuanced understanding of that thing. It will change the field, I think. For example, when I attend climate change meetings looking at technologies, even talking to the Germans who understand nothing happening here. It's a big fight to saying, do you even know what landscape you're working on? And you have no idea when you're saying that. But my saying is different. You go and say it, it'll have another kind of leverage, I hope.
You're talking about incinerators, right? Standards. If it is not meeting the standards, is violating the act. One is that why is the government not doing it, and why activists and civil society organizations right here, sitting here, we are not opposing it. That's one. The other is internationally, what is the alternative, both to Seemaji and Raviji, to incinerators? Are we actually promoting best practices in alternatives to incinerators? We are setting up FSTP plants or DVATs or what Nalini ji is doing. So can we get together these and combine it with the urban development and the urban local bodies? Is there any forum or a network to push that?
So at the municipal level where the decisions are taken, and I'm sorry, would you like to change?
No, you first did, then I also have my bit.
Because it's addressed to me, sorry. Maybe you should say it first and I will.
You go ahead.
At the municipal level, there's very poor understanding of technology systems. And they are driven by consultant, a lot of presentations going on. And they're driven by consultant, and even at the policy level, there's very little understanding of it, as you can see from the Kasturi Rangan report, which the Planning Commission did, and very little consultation about that. And it's not about incineration, it's about appropriate technology. What's the best technology for your waste stream in the next 20, 30 years? In a sense, where would you like to put your money? What's the per ton cost of waste disposal? These are the kind of parameters you would think of. And this becomes debate, the whole thing, why people don't speak about, I don't know why. When the Jindal plant was coming up, almost nobody wanted to speak about it. And I guess there's some other kinds of feeling of pressure. There are political pressures why NGOs don't want to speak about something, or they don't have the technical expertise to speak about it, in a sense. So there could be many, many reasons why, but I think by being research and fact-driven, it becomes a way to speak about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, first of all, I would like to mention that when we talk about the processing, it is the requirement of the rules that the processing needs to be done. Now, which technology to be used, as Ravi appropriately said, that it is all dependent on the municipality, but more than municipality, there are the technical aspects to it, that whether you have sufficient land available with you, because when you talk about something like composting, then you need huge piece of land to process the waste. Then the requirement of that particular technology, what kind of waste should go into a compost plant so that you get good quality of compost. Because what is the idea of processing? The idea of processing is that we need to reduce the waste quantum, and we need to address it in such a way so that it does not cause any kind of environmental impact, adverse impact, right? So from the environmental friendly technologies, then yes, composting, biomethanation, these are good technologies. But when it comes to handling of waste, now we have to decide that what is our priority. Whether we want to handle the waste, we want to reduce the waste quantity, or we are looking into the environmental benefit, then it comes the combination of everything. So it is to be reviewed through the lens of environmental impact, commercial, land availability, then its end use, that where it will go, whether it will be able to sustain itself or not. Like when compost plants were promoted by Government of India, the main issue which were witnessed in almost all the compost plants were that there was not a good market for sale of compost, number one. Number two, operations. I mean, the way you produce the compost, non-efficient methods of production of compost. So ultimately, they tried to offset the cost of that. They tried to do it by, asking the chemical fertilizer production companies to, it is mandatory for them to sell 1 bag of compost against 4 bags of fertilizers which they are selling. Or like Government of India is providing them cross subsidy of rupees 1500 per ton. That is one way of promoting the composting. But at the end of the day, they have to meet the requirement of the compost quality. Now, how do you meet the quality unless and until you are receiving a kind of mixed waste which has got plastic hazardous waste in it? So then the importance of segregation comes into picture. Now let us look at it from the perspective of, the policy makers or those who are promoting this. Now, as a technical person, I would like to say that we are so much, general understanding is that waste to energy is a very bad technology. But then I would say that technology, there is no technology which is, bad technology. Each and every technology is a good technology, provided it is done in the way as it is being laid out to be. So, as Ravi pointed out, that waste to energy technology is quite expensive, but so is biomethanation. I mean, this DWAT technology, if you talk about, there is one plant in Goa where they are handling 100 ton of waste at the cost of 250 crores. That is the cost of biomethanation technology, DWAT technology. So, but that is again being run in India. So, if you talk about only cost factor, then you ultimately, if cost is the only criteria, then it is composting, nothing else. That is the simplest, easiest technology, but then you end up having such big compost plants which are generating so much of odor, that nuisance, then you are not able to sell your compost, you are not able to generate good quantity of compost. So, what to do? And then land requirement. So what to do? Then another alternative is that those who are generating big quantum of waste, again waste to energy is promoted only in those location or areas where you are generating waste more than 500 tons. For low quantum of waste, nobody promotes waste to energy options because it is not economical at all. So first of all, 500, minimum 500 ton of waste you should be handling. Then only you may go for thermal technology. But then in case of thermal technology, it again has got its, plus point in terms of that quick reduction of waste, volume reduction. If you are looking at the option of saving on land, because for landfilling you are having only 15 to 20%, whereas in composting for landfilling you would be having something in the range of 30 to 40%. So it all depends on that what is your priority. Now in terms of until today, the main constraint in case of lobbying for these high cost technology was the capital investment. So now when Government of India is also ready to promote these technologies, then the cities, large cities which are generating huge quantity of waste, they are quick to grab this opportunity. But then, I mean, if you take the example of Jindal, I mean that Okhla Timarpur project which is running, then look at the financial of that project. Government of Delhi did not provide them even a single amount of capital investment. 100% capital investment by the private party for the implementation of the project. And revenue is either from the CDM benefit, but unfortunately where are CDM benefits now? So what is the revenue? You are treating around 2000 ton of waste and you are operating it. You, even if you are not producing good quantum of energy out of it, but at least you are reducing the quantum to 20%. And out of 10,000 ton of waste which Delhi is producing, 2,000 ton of waste is handled by this project, and this project has been there for the last 6 years. And then in terms of the public resistance and not meeting the environmental norms, so yes, I mean, I have been closely monitoring this plant and I have been visiting it on regular basis. So now they have an online monitoring system. They have it, and it's been there for the last 2 years. After the public resistance and all those things, when Mrs. Sheila Dikshit's time, after that, no, there was, you showed that picture, na, where there was.
The online is not public.
Does it have
No, it is online, it is public, I personally saw this, it is public, there is online system, but then I would say that yes, like any other, the way other things work in India, this is also not an exception. Let us accept the fact. But then my question is, especially to Ravi, that if, I mean, on one side we have these huge dump sites, zero compliance. It is zero compliance, I would say, because we're not processing anything, and even if we are processing something, as Nalini mentioned, in terms of handling 10 to 20% of the waste, then 80% of our waste is going into the disposal sites. And if incineration is also not the solution, composting is also not working, then what is the solution? What should we do? So why we are not resisting as public, I would say, or as researchers, or as people working in this sector, why we are not resisting open dumping of waste, which is the biggest problem. We are not saying anything about it. You look at 3 big sites in Delhi, and each and every city has a dump site. But we as citizens, we as NGOs, or we as policy workers, why we are not resisting it? Why we are not making any rules and regulations? Unless and until the NGT intervenes, nothing happens. The cities, they keep on disposing their waste like that. And isn't that scenario worse than having an incinerator? So what we talk about, 0%, or we just talk about 100%. We are not talking about anything in between. That at least gives the cities the chance to come to a level of 20%, 40%, 50%. We are saying either you have a proper system or no system at all. So, I mean, this is something which is quite debatable, and in the rules also I would like to mention that why they're talking about you do it 100%, 100%. There has to be something like 40% or 50% also. You try to motivate them to gradually come to that level of 100%. What is, I mean, how can something be achieved in just 1 day or 1 year of time?
That's a very, at the end what you said was, I think, one of my pet peeves with this environment law thing is that, the thing of having 100% standard. You don't have a 50% or a 60% or a, progression standard in any of the, the big environmental hazard problems. And it takes a lot of time and effort to get the infrastructure and the systems in place, even if you knew what the right solution was. And, often we don't know and we don't have consensus about what the right solutions are. So I think that's a really important problem of, we know where we need to get, but we don't know anything. I mean, we don't know enough about the path to getting there. And
But on another note, what's a discussion about solid waste unless people have some sharp disagreements? So, do we have any more, Ravi? Before we go to you for closing comments, do we have any more questions, Shivani? And then, yeah. So we'll go to you first, and then Shivani here.
Thank you very much for educating us to the waste management. But we have come very well, as per I have been observing, because previously we were having, a traditional type of throwing the garbage. Now we are making it in a brick form. I think you must be aware of it. We are making it in brick form, the solid and the organic differently. And then we are coming into a thermal form, as you have rightly mentioned. And it is known as plasma gasification, in which you have to get to the temperature of a sun, and everything will be reduced to water. So these are technology, and they are commercially viable, and they are being implemented in your country. This is what I want to say.
Shivani, your question, and then I'll go to Ravi, and then. Okay, very quickly because
Ma'am, please use the mic.
Nalini ji also mentioned the Bangalore, the High Court in Karnataka, and there's been kind of a mention of NGT repeatedly in the presentations. And I'm quite curious about both of you thinking what the role of the courts is here. Because very clearly, I've seen the NGT functioning, and NGT at one point was very much about you need to do composting, recycling, whatever, and then suddenly after one affidavit filed, it just turned into we will only support waste to energy plants, and there was this complete change in the NGT's attitude. But the larger question is, should we be looking towards the NGT to address this problem? Because as I think you mentioned, every time NGT says this problem has to be addressed, that problem gets addressed, and then at the cost of all other landfills. So I'm just wondering what both of you think from your experience the role of the court should be in this kind of a problem.
Actually, I don't think it's an either or, as Seema, no either or situation. It's a mindset of where do you go. Do you, for example, what Nalini is doing, and there are many such projects in the country. She's one of the most successful ones. There is almost no cooperation by the municipality. So you're willing to put 200, 300 crores, and ILFS was the partner in the Jindal plant. You're willing to put 200, 300 crores for a low-end waste incinerator, but you're not willing to spend the money in looking at decentralized, looking at people's participation, looking at decentralized composting, for example. There are many examples. So people are doing it on their own. People are not doing it with any kind of support. There are many ways you can draw up an alternative plan of waste management. And the key question about, not waste, because everything is waste to energy, about incineration is how viable is it? It's a key question, and I think we cannot dismiss that question, how viable is it? I think we have to look at the specifics of everything, and the opportunity cost of the money we're spending, and what's the best pyramid we need to do it in. Of course, given this current scenario which municipalities find themselves in, which they're not willing to open up, not willing to give up control of something, and actually would, if it wasn't for the laws, would see the waste picker as a delegitimate sector completely, then where do you move from there? And I think courts can't change mindsets. Courts can do certain kind of regulatory thing, they can push the system. How do you change a mindset into something? So we are caught in a classic mindset of the municipality being the sole in charge of that. The plasma thing you mentioned, they wanted to put in South Delhi, I don't know if it's coming up there. Plasma is a very, very high-end technology. Of course, now there's a company in Gujarat which makes it, and they've been sort of trying to get it in, and they've got the standards for it in the latest rules. But plasma is internationally being used only for chemical weapons, for chemical weapon destruction. It's a high-end, up-end technology. You don't use plasma for municipal waste destruction. Nowhere in the world do you use it. You use mass incineration, you use RDF, but not plasma. So I think we sort of take on everything without, and what really frustrates me is that just complete logical thinking about exactly what we are doing. These questions cannot be asked. So if you then pose the question saying, what else should we do? Then I'm sorry, that's your problem, but I want to ask the question, and I want to say, have you considered those questions? When in the Timarpur, when the committee was made, they had no pollution control they had no pollution control on their system. I mean, I said, and why don't you have it? So we thought we'll put it later. We thought we'd put it later. In the middle of the meeting, we said put it later. And they insisted on the calorific value, which is non-existent in Indian waste, even if you compress it. So some of these things defy logic, defy real information, and so I think they're political. That's all I can say. If they don't make sense to me, then they have to be political. They can mean no other reason. So if that is the way to go, then it's a very difficult debate because what becomes apparent, and for me, I don't think environmental standards or environmental choices should be made on of course, the politics of the environment all the time, but not on these decisions. On technical decisions, on what we need to do, what's the best possible example. We need a better, we don't have a technology evaluation of any of these. We don't have any system of educating the municipalities how to do technology. So they are all applying for funds and they're getting the funds to get it. This is not the way to proceed. You're committing yourself to the next 30 years of high capital investment. And why should we see it happen? I mean, this is public money going there. So that's where I come from. If you can convince me this is the right choice, I'll say, yes, go ahead and do it. But I'm not convinced.
Technology evaluation is not done by the government, it is done by the people, entrepreneurs, who say that these things can work on such technologies. So they are the leaders, they do it, and then the government adopts it, or the BIS adopts it.
Guys, if Seema can briefly just respond to those questions to Anina.
One thing is that as plasma technology, you pointed out, Ravi rightly mentioned that it is not to be used on municipal solid waste. It is, so we had done our research and we found out that there is only one plant in Japan which, yeah, okay. So the role of the courts, I would say that in India, the main problem is, again, as Ravi said, mindset. Unless and until something is enforced on you, you are not going to do anything else. So either you do it, if you are not enforcing it through the court system, then you do it through the law enforcement. So someone has to do it. But there is no penalty associated with, because we very nicely made the policies, regulatory requirements, but we never say what if not. And that is the key. Like he rightly said that in the Okla Timarpur plant, if they have not put the environmental control system, because it is very much there in the contract agreement, I was part of that. So it's very much there, but what if they are not doing it? So in the contract, if you are able to bind the contractor or the operator, that if you are not doing this, then you will be penalized with this, or your contract will be terminated, then you are basically empowering the city government also to terminate the contract. So it is very important that we make such kind of contract while awarding such kind of projects to a private party, because lot of technology providers, they come to you and they show you that, okay, this technology is like something that it will quickly remove your waste from the system and zero landfilling. I've never seen this in my real life. So when they say this, that then from our side, from a consultant perspective or from an expert perspective, the suggestion to city government is that you please mention it in the contract. That, okay, you commit to me that there will be 0% reject. There will be all compliance that will be met. And if they will not be met, then either you will be penalized as, say, 150% of the cost which you will be paid, or your contract will be terminated. Then you will automatically see that there will be those people will come forward who actually mean business.
Thanks, and on this note, we close this discussion. I know we can go on and on because there's so much and it's so interesting, and
There can be only me and Ravi later on.
there's so much more to talk about. I know. Thanks, we made our panelists work very hard. So thanks very much to all. I know you have any in absentia. Thanks.
Thank you, Arkaja.